Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jay Schmidt, and I am a project manager at MindWare Technologies, and I will be providing you the webinar today that we're holding, covering E-Prime integration with MindWare. Okay, so the first topic that we're going to be covering is basic PC and MindWare hardware configurations. Okay, so this is basically just a slide to show you a simple configuration between MindWare and your stimulus presentation PC. And we're going to be covering E-Prime for our stimulus presentation PC software today. And what we can see here is we have our data acquisition PC here on the left, and then we have the one of our BioNexes. It's known as the 8 slot here in the middle. And then on the right side, we have a stimulus presentation PC running E-Prime on the right. And so the idea is that basically we have BioLab running left, and it's waiting for these events that are being sent from, well, they'll be captured inside of the chassis, but they're being sent from the stim PC. And so you'll have this event cable. This is typically a parallel port cable or a DB25 connection, line print terminal, all of those. And that'll run from the back of the stimulus PC to the back of the 8 slot. And this is how we're actually capturing those events that E-Prime is sending out. And we'll kind of go over the different types of timings and when you might want to send out these events. And then finally, we have a USB cable coming from one of our chassis. In this instance, it's an 8 slot, and that's going to the data acquisition PC. And it's just a simple USB cable. So this is just giving you an overview of how the system will work. And this is exactly the same thing with the wireless data center. So if anybody here is using our hardware, it's probably one of the two things. And this is just a general, simple overview of how they connect. We do have a newly created knowledge base article that you can find within our support site. So if you go to the support.mindwaretech.com, there's this knowledge base article number 56. And this actually has very good pictures and step-by-step of where the cable plugs into on the PC and on your chassis, and where the trigger goes and stuff like that. So please view this knowledge base article following the webinar if you have any additional connection questions. Okay, so now we are going to go into BioLab trigger modes, just the events in general, event tabs, and then basically a configuration file that you will create to sort of marry your slides from E-Prime up to the event codes that we're seeing in BioLab. And I'm obviously going to explain that a little further here. So just kind of keep this in mind, and we can always circle back if anybody's confused. But what we're going to demonstrate today is using BioLab, using E-Prime to actually trigger BioLab, and in essence triggering your chassis to begin data acquisition. This is a way to synchronize both of the systems without having to have someone manually press start or stop to begin the actual physiology. We can simply send out a value of 128 bytes or higher, and that will automatically trigger both systems to start at the same time. So what we're going to demonstrate is called rising edge, and what we're looking for in this mode is basically to go from a lower value, something like most people will start with 0, and then we're going to actually send a byte value of 128 or higher, and this is sort of depicted here in our little square wave diagram. And so basically as soon as the value, which is our vertical portion here, reaches 120 units or higher, it's going to say, okay, start BioLab, everything started at the same time, and then we can kind of move forward. So let's actually navigate into BioLab, and I will show you exactly what I'm talking about. So this is basically the first screen that you guys would see as soon as you detect your chassis or your hardware. And the trigger mode that we're talking about with the rising edge is found right here. And so typically if you're going to do an acquisition, you have this guy off and you hit acquire at the bottom, and then you'll hit start or stop at the next screen. Well, this is, like I said before, this is how we're going to actually have E-Prime start the acquisition for us by sending that rising edge. So if we navigate to trigger modes, we can actually simply choose rising. And just like what I said before, as soon as BioLab detects that rising value of 128 bytes or higher, it's going to automatically begin acquisition. So both systems are synced. So let's turn that to rising. And then finally, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start looking at our events in our synchronous event port. And so what we do to that is go to navigate over to the Events tab. And we'll go to the synchronous events 1 in this instance. If we wanted to go to a different synchronous event port, you would simply have to change that on the back of the chassis, if applicable. And so this is basically what I'm talking about again. So right here you can see that we have this connector plugged into the first port up here. And then there's also one right below that you're not seeing. And so if you wanted to switch, you would just simply switch them over. But for this instance, we're going to go ahead and keep it on 1. So what we're doing now is, and if this is off, make sure you do turn to summary, and we'll highlight the synchronous summary event table here on the right. But what we're trying to do is we're simply trying to correlate a slide in E-Prime or something that you're presenting with basically the event code that's sent through, so we know what is happening. So basically, if we send a byte value of 1, then it would, in this instance, be the beginning of the hippo slide, and we'll see the hippo slide. And then basically you just go through with your different values, and then you know when each slide was presented or when it ended, baseline begin, baseline end, all of those sorts of things. And so basically you can create this summary event file by simply clicking and editing. You can add, remove, copy them, and such like that. So if I wanted to add my next one here, I would come here and I label it as such. Where these end up going after we're done is, you can see right here, this is where I have it saved. I mean, you can choose any path you'd like. It's normally the best idea to save your event file in the same folder that you might have, your E-Prime script that's running this data. But you could save these wherever you want. So as soon as we're done with it, if I did make a change to something like here, we'll call it a change. As soon as I click away, it's going to ask me if I'd like to save it, at which point, again, you could save it in your default path directory, or you could save it to a new location. I'm not going to save because I don't want to change mine, but that's how you would do that. And then again, you could go and find where that is by simply clicking on the folder button. All right, and we will circle back to this, and it will make a lot more sense in a second here, but I needed to jump forward just to show you guys how to save those. Okay, cool. So now, now that we've sort of had these byte values, then now would be a very good time to open up E-Prime. But before we do so, there is one thing that we need to check. So as I said back in one of the earlier slides, this connection, I'll actually show you guys right here. So this connection coming from the stimulus presentation PC, this is actually going to need to be plugged into a line print terminal or a parallel port that's in the back of your stimulus PC. And so once we've done that, we actually need to make sure that it's installed, and we need to check what line print terminal number it's using. So to do so, you go to your PC's device manager, and I'll get this guy out of the way here. And we're going to go to ports, and we'll see that we have a COM port, and I also have my LPT number 1 port. And so you should see this in your device manager if you have it installed correctly. So if we needed to change the parallel port number, we could simply click into this and go to port settings, and then you'll see right here under the enable legacy plugin play detection, we have an option of changing it from 1 to 2 or 3. And this will make a little bit more sense here in a second, but most of the time you could leave it on LPT1, and then that's probably the default for most of your scripts. But if you did need to change it, this is how you would do so on the PC. Now we're going to open up E-Prime, And we can see that we have my experiment here that I've already built, and we have my session proc window, and this is sort of just like a linear way of seeing what slide comes after what. And one quick note here, we are showing and demonstrating a very simple script here. We're not showing any sort of list with randomization tables or anything like that. If anybody had any more advanced questions on those kind of scripts, you could definitely check out the PST website right here, www.pst.net.com. And then they have a lot of really helpful tutorials, videos, and knowledge-based articles, which will show you kind of the more advanced ones. But for today, we're simply demonstrating on how to use the task events to actually send the codes out. Anything more advanced, please see out those other resources I just mentioned. Okay, so we were just talking about the line print terminal, and so as you saw before, it was on LPT1. So now we need to make sure that our experiment is going to be sending these events through the same sort of port. So what we can do is we can actually click on the experiment here, right above our session proc window, and that'll pull up my experiment object properties. Within here, we're going to select the devices. We're going to tell E-Prime basically what device we're going to be sending these events out of. I've already added my parallel port. If you guys did not have this available when you started, you simply click on Add, and then you would select the parallel port. That gets us to this point. To ensure that we're on the same LPT port number as Windows is, we simply click into it, and then it gives us the line print terminal option, and we have an option of choosing 1 through 8. Again, before, we could see that mine was on 1, so I'm good, I can leave it, and we're done. And we'll just want to make sure you hit apply and OK. If you do not add the device, such as the parallel port at that setting, it is not going to be available on the next window, and you're not going to be able to move forward, so that's an important first step. So let's actually start looking at some of these slides, and then we can go back to BioLab, and the event tab will make a little bit more sense. So this is some advice on just how we have found the systems to kind of work together the most efficiently, in the most efficient manner. And that is to begin your experiment, and you can do this in a bunch of different ways. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually have my welcome screen, which is the first thing they see, send out a code. And it's not going to be to begin acquisition, but what it is going to do is it's going to clear the line to ensure that we're starting at a good baseline of 0. Since we're using that rising edge, it just kind of makes a little more sense to start from 0 and then work our way up. And so if I do start with 0, then we sort of know that when the experiment does begin in the next slide, it won't accidentally be triggered by something else. If we send out that 0, we know we're at 0. And I'll really quickly here show you how I added these settings. They're already added for all my other slides, but just to go through these. So what I've done is I've added an event, and I've had it kind of go through at onset time. So let's go ahead and delete this, and then I'll remake this for you and show you what I did. So again, I'm in my first window. I go to Properties, Task Events. I'm going to delete this, and we're going to add it. And I like to choose the onset times as my actual event. Once I do that, we can see that my task name, I actually have a little, my dot dot opens up. It's not grayed out anymore. And it's letting me choose one of the devices that I added in the previous screen. Again, so when I first started, I went up to this experiment window up here and added the parallel port device. If I didn't do that first, then it's not going to be available on this next screen. It is available to me because I added it, so we simply double click on that. As soon as we do that, we're going to start opening up some of these grayed out windows. First one we're going to do is we're going to write a byte. For the value, again, I'm going to want to kind of zero this out to make sure that I know where I'm starting from. And then finally, the data type is going to be byte. And that is all we need to do. And you'll kind of see that this is pretty much the basic setup here that we're going to go through. Again, you're probably going to want some sort of experiment that's designed in a way so that your list is randomizing everything for you, but we're not going to cover that just to kind of keep it simple for everyone. So we're going to start off with a value of 0, and we're going to hit OK. Okay, the next slide I have in here, and again, this is just how I designed it, is my instructions number 1 page. This is typically when you would do like your baseline in most experiments, and so this is simply a slide that just waits for 5 minutes and collects that baseline data before we start our experiment. So the way I designed it in this instance is I'm actually going to have this slide begin the trigger. And this is where we see that we have that value of 128. This is what is needed, 128 or higher, so 128 to 255, anywhere in between there. You can send that value through, and then as soon as E-Prime loads that slide, it's going to send out that pulse to the BioNex, or the 8 slot, or the data center, whichever you choose, and then which will then in turn let BioLab know to begin acquisition. And so this, again, this 128 value is the same that we looked at from this slide. So that's exactly what we're talking about. It's basically looking for that rising edge that we set, and it's looking for a value of 128 or higher. Okay, so now that we've loaded that, then this is exactly when this slide would populate, then this is exactly when we would begin acquisition. And so then we'll check out the slide after this. And this is, like I said, this is saying you're about to view some pictures. Please focus on images. And from here, we can see that I've set another 0. And so this is me kind of, I triggered it with whatever value. It looks like I did a 128 before. And then I'm going to work my way back down to 0 and kind of work in a very ascending order from here. So 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. So, okay, I've zeroed my signal again. Good. And then we can see here that my next slide is going to be hippo. I'm actually going to clean things up for everyone. It's supposed to get too messy, but here's my next slide that I'm looking at. It's a picture of a hippo. And so in here, in the task events, we can see that I have 2 more events in here. First one is to populate when the hippo slide appears, or the onset time. And then the second one is going to send out a value when the hippo image disappears. If you have 2 images right next to each other, it wouldn't necessarily be mandatory to have both of these in here, as you could simply use the onset time of your next stimulus as the offset time of the previous, but this is just how I designed this one. So we sent out our 0 initially, we sent out our 128 or higher to trigger the system. We're now recording data. We did our 0 again, and then finally the next thing we're going to do is start to send out these actual events to correlate to each slide. So hippo slide turns on, we've done all those settings again, and we're now sending out a value of 1. And as soon as the slide disappears, we're going to send out a value of 2. And we're basically just going to do this over and over again. I have, as you can see here, some weights in here to sort of just give some time in between. That's not necessary. It's just how I designed it. But here's my next slide. And in this, I've sent the 3 and then the 4, and this kind of just goes all the way up through all of my slides. And one of the reasons why I have these weights in here is actually, you can see in the task events, I actually have a value of 0 in between. This kind of makes it a very nice square wave when you're looking at the events populate through BioLab. So you start at 0 and you go up and you come all the way down. If you weren't to zero this out, it's simply going to go to the value. Let's say it's 1, and then stay at that level, and then it's going to go to 2 and just keep rising. So again, it's kind of your choice on how you want to look at it. I just like to 0 between everything to get us right back down to that baseline. But yeah, so anyways, we just have all of our slides here. We have our task event value, and then what it does is, as soon as it appears, it shoots it through, and then we can read it. So let me get one of these open here, and I can show you guys a little bit better. Okay, so here's my first slide, or actually, I'm sorry, this is my second one. So I have values 3 and 4, and if I pull up BioLab, this is what we're talking about now. So the dog begin is a value of 3 in BioLab, and then I've set my dog end as a value of 4. And in here, we can see the same values. Dog onset, or dog begin, is 3. Dog offset, or dog end, is 4. And so when those are sent through, we read the same value, and then this event name will populate in the real-time event log. If you didn't change the names here, everything would still work, but you would see everything come through with this default value or this default name of sync summary event and its number and position. So this is why it really helps to sort of name all of these to what they are in your actual E-Prime script. Okay. Cool. Next, we are going to show you how to actually view these events in our MindWare application. We have your analysis application, sorry. So now we are done with BioLab. We have sent everything through correctly, and I'll actually demo just this real quick for you guys here. So we're going to give it a test name, so demo. And as you can see now, with that rising edge at the top left, the start-stop has actually been grayed out because it's waiting for that trigger from BioLab, or I'm sorry, from E-Prime. So that's why you cannot start it on your own. This is versus this when we have it off. And so now I can start it. So those are kind of the difference. That's what that actual changing that trigger modes will do for you, okay? Cool. So now let's go into one of our analysis applications, and I will show you guys basically how to view these E-Prime events and what they're going to look like. Okay, so I'm going to open HRV, and I've already loaded the file. I'll go ahead and remap the channels to show you guys what it would be like from the beginning. So we open HRV, and it asks me to, look for the file. I select it. I select my MWI file, and then this is where we are. As you can see, I have a few measures here that we collected. So all I need to do is map these to the title of them. This is covered in a different webinar if you guys need more instruction on this, and we will show that in a second. So we're going to kind of breeze through this, but basically we just kind of line these up with what they are. Really important one here that we're looking at is our summary digital port. So if you did have events go through on one of your digital ports, then you'll have this available, and you're going to want to make sure that he's selected to event. Once we got all our channels mapped, we're going to hit OK. This is going to take us to our main setup screen, and what we can do is we can actually see everything that was sent through on this file right here in our event list. And so one of the first, and probably most of the time, if you're using the trigger mode as in any manner, your first thing is going to be an acquisition start. This is basically just sending that value of 128 or higher and to start the experiment. After that, if you're using E-Prime in the way that we did, you're going to have all of these different types which are just saying what port it went through. If we hover over that, we can see that they went through synchronous port 1. And our next thing over is going to be our names. This is where we named all of those slides just a second ago inside of BioLab. And then the time that they went through. A few different things you can do here. You can actually choose to filter the events by their name or the type. So acquisition PC, this is just the beginning. This is the trigger. If you didn't want to use this and you wanted to start the acquisition later, you could simply just have your first event be begin experiment and then not use them. But that's where that guy is. And then synchronous digital port, that'll be all of the codes that were actually sent through E-Prime except for the trigger. All events will leave everything on at the same time. Finally, when you're actually viewing these inside of the analyses, you can choose to see the name, which is going to be these. So acquisition start, hippo begin, hippo end. Or you can change it to type, at which point it'll say, what did it come from, the acquisition PC? Did it come from the synchronous port or E-Prime in this instance? Or another one might be a user-defined event that is pressed on the keyboard, F1 through F10, and those will also be here. So you can kind of choose how you want to view it, but that's how you do that. Use an event file and event file path. These are actually to load a nullness event file that was collected alongside the MindWare, not relating to these events. So if you did load it correctly and you mapped it as such here, then your events should show up. One last note here is we got to make sure that if you do have events and you wanted to look at events, that you're in a mode that will show them. So you have two options here. You can actually go into event, and there's a few different options. or you can go into event and time, and then again there's a few more options. We're not going to go over this any further because again we've already had a webinar that cover all of the different events and modes and all of our analysis applications, so please view that. And I can actually show you this right here. So this will be available, and we'll actually have a pop-up when we populate this video to our YouTube page, but basically there's our MindWare Technology Support site, and there is a webinar right here called the Analysis Application Events and Modes, and pull this over here for you. And so this right here is the one that will cover that a little bit further. Okay. But please do visit the support portal, and there's a lot of great information there. Under training, you can actually see our training videos. This is all of our training videos that we've created, along with past webinars, as you can see here. And then finally, specifically relating to this webinar, if we go into our knowledge base, we actually have an entire section covering integration. And this is E-Pirme that we're covering. And then here we are seeing knowledge base 56. That is also another knowledge base article that we covered earlier that shows you how to actually plug the cable into everything and what that'll look like. So you guys saw an image similar to this. Okay, so that's our support site. Okay, and then so that is covering all of the demonstration part of the webinar. It's 1 o'clock now. We have about a half an hour, so if anybody had any questions, please put them through now. If you did already put your questions through, then I will begin to answer them shortly. Okay, we already got a few questions that were answered during the webinar, and our staff has shown me those questions, and we're going to go through and actually answer them. Okay, so first question is, can I delete an event if I have decided to exclude it from analyses? Yes, you can, and how we'll actually deal with events post-experiment is in BioLab. So typically we'll use our analysis applications to make any edits to any of the physio data after the experiment, except for events. Events, we're going to need to edit those in BioLab and sort of resave them so that everything works a little bit better. So if you ever did have to do anything with events, just remember that you'll need to go into BioLab to do so. So right now, we can see that my acquisition source is BioNex. And what we'll need to do if we want to view a file afterwards is simply switch to file mode. You can also do this by going to File and Open File. But just wanted you to kind of be aware of the acquisition source here to BioNex, because as soon as we change over to a file, you'll see what happens. But so yeah, so we can load basically one of our files that we've loaded. This is the same one that we viewed in E-Pirme. And we can see that my source changed to file. And we can also see down at the bottom here, the green button that used to say acquire is now saying view. And so what we're going to do is we're going to click on this. And jump over here. Okay, so this is basically our trigger coming through. It's at 255. This only needed to be 128 or higher, but I sent a 255 through in this instance. We can see all of my events that went through are also available here. My physiology is down here. It's kind of smashed so we can't see it, but what we can see here is all of my events throughout the file. I'm viewing at 60 seconds here. If you guys didn't see all of your events, it's likely that they're farther in the file. So you can simply adjust your window size or the start time to get over there. We can move it over here like that, or we could simply grab this guy and go through time just like that. Okay, so let's actually start here. So if we wanted to delete an event after the experiment, so let's say hippo end, what we could do is we could come in and simply, if we didn't want this one, we could right-click on it and say remove event. It's going to ask me if I want to get rid of it. I do, and then all of a sudden it's gone. All we have now is .begin. Again, I sent out two events very closely to each other in my design. I sent out the end of one and the beginning of the other almost at the same time, 50 milliseconds difference. But you wouldn't have to. You could simply use cow begin as the dog end, but that's up to you. But yeah, that's how you would actually remove one of those. To save everything, we're simply going to get out of this, and then BioLab is going to recognize that we've made a change, and it's asking me if I want to save it, and I'm going to say yes. And then so the next time I would do this file, and I'll actually make this a little cleaner for you. So next time I view a file, we see that it's been removed still. Okay. Okay, next question is, how does a falling edge trigger work, and when should I use it? So let's switch back over to the BioNex, and I'll actually show you guys what setting we're talking about. And so if we're back in trigger mode, I basically demonstrated rising. We also have a few other options here, including falling. So the question is when to use a falling edge, or when you might. So I can actually show you this within the graphic that we showed earlier. And so this is what we used, was the rising edge initially. So your falling edge would basically be, if you were, it would in essence be tracking this right here. So what it's going to do is, let's say that we were going at this normal value of whatever it is. Let's say we're at 100 and we wanted to go down. You could send through a value of 99 or whatever, and it will go down. As soon as the value goes down from a higher to a lower value, BioLab will then know to trigger at that point in time. This is really more or less used when you're using a bunch of different devices to all sync at the same time. And just an error here that I just recently spoke about, it's going to need to be a 128 or greater value for the high value. Okay, next question is, does it matter which digital port I use on the BioNex 8 slot? On the newer 8 slots, both digital ports are synchronous, and so they're really high precision inputs. On the older 8 slots, the digital 1 is collected at like a lower sampling frequency, so it'd be ideal to use the digital 2. We do have a knowledge-based article that actually covers all of this information here, which I will pull up for you in a second. It's known as Knowledge Base Article 17. And we can see here, so I went to the portal, we're at Knowledge Base Article number 17. And we have a few different generations, and simply by looking at the back of these, we can tell the different generation parts. But basically, this is the newest one, and here are some of the older ones. So again, if you had one of the older ones, then it's probably ideal to use the digital I/O number 2. And then we also have the digital 1 there, but again, those were sampled at a lower frequency. So please see those articles if you had questions about that. Okay, next question is simply, how do you pull up Device Manager? This is going to vary depending on what operating system you have. Most of the time it is done by simply clicking the Windows button here, or the Start button if you're using Windows 7. It used to be a circle blue. If you're doing that, then you could, in Windows 7, you would simply have a bar here, and you could type in Device Manager. For Windows 10, we can see that we have the Cortana little search bar already available, so we can just type into that. So you can simply type Device Manager and pull it up. Next question is, what if my computer doesn't have a parallel port? So desktops can install PCI-based parallel port cards. Basically, it's just another card that will slide into the back of your PC tower, if available, much like your video inputs or an additional network card would. And those can be purchased for fairly cheap. Laptops, if available, some have docking stations which have this parallel port attachment on there. You could also use a laptop with a PCI card slot, and they have PCI cards or laptops that will slide in there, and then on the other end they're a parallel port. Those are also available. And finally, you could also utilize PST's Kronos platform. So PST is who is making E-Prime for us, and they also have a system known as the Kronos. and which could handle that for us. And so if you had any more specific questions about that, our on-staff PST rep, Kevin, can actually demo that for us. Ryan, sorry. Next question. Why would we want to zero out during the wait? So I believe this is in reference to an E-Prime coding question here. So basically they're asking why we're going to want to send a zero out during the wait. Setting the zero allows you to send any codes following the zero, so including the same code again. So if we wanted to, basically you could have up to 255 individual events with those values. So if we shoot out a 1 and a 2 and a 3, if we keep zeroing after each of those events, we'll go back down to 0. This will allow you to have all of that overhead freedom to keep moving up. If we don't do zeros and we just go 1, 2, 3 with nothing in between, then we have to sort of go back down at some point if you wanted to reuse them. If not, you're going to end up using all of your events fairly shortly. Okay, we have another question here about how we can send multiple events for one object. So I'll explain that again here. So if we wanted to send multiple events for the same exact object, what we could do is we go into the object properties, and you can already see I have 2 here, but let's just say we wanted to do another one. This can be used for marking events at specific offsets in live media, such as video. And what I do is I simply click Add, and obviously there's a few options here. I'm going to choose onset again, even though I've already chosen that. We can then go to the parallel port, and I can set up any sort of delay here. So if there was some sort of, the slide began and then there was live media afterwards, then you could simply set in a delay here, like the live media is presented 100 later. So E-Prime is all written in milliseconds, so this is 100 milliseconds later. Again, we just do the parallel port, we write it. We began, I think, with a value of 3 here. So, and then we had 4 for my off. And so if I wanted to set another value, I would probably send one such as 6, and then byte. And then we have onset with no delay that'll happen immediately when the stimulus is presented. And then we have another one with a value of 6, which has been delayed 100 milliseconds. Another way to look at this, which might be a little bit more useful, would be we're going to send through a value of 3 as soon as the dog is presented, and then we're going to wait for a keyboard press. Let's say you're having them hit spacebar at some point during there to open a portal for a website or a video or something, but it only starts when the keyboard is pressed. So we'll add a keyboard press one, and then just basically everything the same. And then I would probably use a value of 6 here. Okay, we have another question about individual events in BioLab. So we're going to navigate back over there and I'll show you what we're talking about. So we're inside of BioLab, and we're going to go to the Event tab. By default, when you install BioLab, it's going to be off. And we selected Summary, and that's why we have all of our 255 individual events. There's also another option here known as Individual. So if we select this, basically what this is doing, it's giving you 8 events, basically 4 in 8 slot, and they can all be fired simultaneously instead of 255 events that cannot be simultaneous. So it's based on the bits within a byte, so a value of 1 sends channel 1, 2 sends on line 2, and 4 sends on line 3. It's binary logic, which we can't extremely cover here, but that is how you would do so. And that's what it's used for. Okay, we do have another question here, and the question is, can BioLab and E-Prime run on the same PC? Yes, they can, but it is generally not recommended, as you cannot control everything completely, and it can compromise timing. So typically this is done on a 2 PC system. So we have an acquisition PC and then a stimulus, just like in the beginning that I showed. Okay, we do have a small request here to show the event files just so everyone knows what they look like. So I'll go ahead and pull up BioLab and we can look at those. So here's our event files that we've created. So as soon as we do such, it'll save it. But if we go and pull that open, I can simply open this as just a text document here. But this is how they are produced. So it's fairly straightforward. Okay, everyone, it is 1:30, so we are finishing up our webinar right now. Thank you so much for attending the webinar. Please complete the survey on your way out. As soon as you guys are going to leave, you're going to get prompted for a survey. Any sort of information you guys can give us as far as the webinar, just answering the questions you're presented would be very, very helpful, just so we can kind of improve our webinars in the future. Again, on the bottom left here, we can see the MindWare support portal, which is just the support.mindwaretech.com. Please visit that. We are almost constantly putting new articles in there, which will help you guys out. We also have all of our saved webinars from the past, and then you can actually sign up for new webinars in the future right from that page as well. So pretty powerful site, so please check it out. And thank you for attending, and everyone have a great day.